It's 9 a.m. I've been awake for about half an hour. I don't have time to make myself look pretty, so you're going to have to deal with it. Welcome back to Transformers Review Offs. Today I'm going to take a look at Beast Wars Inferno and Beast Wars Polar Claw. I picked these guys up at a place called JC Comics in Cuyahoga Falls. It's a comic shop, and it turns out that they have this one nice big case full of Transformers and some old stuff that I don't usually see anywhere else. That was really cool. I'm gonna have to go back there at some point. So let's start with Inferno. I already reviewed Silverbolt once, assuming I actually said it. He was actually my favorite Maximal from Beast Wars. Inferno was my favorite Predacon, and that's because he is crazy and he's a pyromaniac. And so having this toy is kind of awesome for me because I always wanted one when he was actually on the shelves and I never got one. He's fairly show accurate, all things considered. I mean, there's a lot of translucent plastic on this, which is kind of cool, like his forearms, the outer casing of his butt wings, his chest, those are all translucent, but I mean, that looks fine. You know, the head sculpt is good, and he actually comes with a couple of gimmicks. First and foremost, of course, there we go. Split open ant abdomen does actually spin, which again is true to the show. He did that. He's also got, rather than a flamethrower, his ant mandibles are detachable, and I haven't really figured out how they're supposed to work. I mean, because if you look at this, you've got the mandibles, and then you've got this part in here. This is the actual gun. It's itty bitty, but it's what's got the spring for firing the missiles. They both have pegs for holding, and this is actually set up so that the button slides into a slot, and if you push it all the way forward, which I can't actually do, there we go. If you push it all the way forward, that depresses the button. So I'm not entirely certain if it's supposed to be two different weapons or one weapon the way I've got it, how exactly it's supposed to work, but whatever. Notably, the projectiles are actually these things here, so they actually form into part of his beast mode, which is very cool. Polar Claw is a random Maximal. It's obvious that he turns into a polar bear. That's not going to be a surprise. He has a massive six-pack, which is kind of disturbing. Overall, he's sort of very blocky. He's very red and white. You know, he's not exactly Santa Claus, but he's also full of gimmicks. For starters, because he's a Wave 1 Beast Wars guy, he's got two different faces, and I think this is supposed to be the mutant face, and it looks horrible. The only thing about it, though, is that if you have him on the robot face, which I usually do, that's just too much red. But he's got two gimmicks, and they're both based around the claws up here. When I'm not messing with the gimmicks, I usually have them down like that, but I think you're actually supposed to have them both over his shoulder. So this one does this. That's kind of cool. Whereas the other one, I have to catch it. Ooh! The entire claw fires off and turns into this little bat guy, which that's completely random and weird, but it's actually got a peg so he can hold it. I'm not certain if it's supposed to be a weapon. You can turn it around and there's a hole in its butt for sticking onto the peg there, but I don't think it's actually supposed to be a weapon. It's just like a familiar, if you will. But that's what he does. Although that's kind of cool, you know, favorite Predacon. So Inferno's gonna get that one. Transformation. Inferno, I'll tell you right now, is kind of a pain in the ass because he has lots of legs and lots of joints. There's really no way of telling exactly how it is you're supposed to put him together. And the mandibles, again, go into the actual ant face, which can be kind of a pain depending on where the inner gun part is, because that has to hook up through his head, so you can push it while it's in his mouth, which is neat. And then everything is just pretending that he doesn't have robot arms or legs. One of the big problems that I have with this toy, though, is that he doesn't peg together at all anywhere. There's no guides. You just sort of move everything and guess that you have it right. His hips come apart, and then they just sort of sit against the solid part of the abdomen, and it's like those could have pegged in somewhere, but there's nothing. It's just solid. Also, notably, he has a waist swivel that does nothing. It's weird because it lines up if you flip it around, but it's not supposed to go that way. It's supposed to go this way. So it really has no use whatsoever. Polar Claw's actually got a third gimmick, which I'll get to in a moment, but it actually makes transforming him a little bit of a pain, and that's on top of the fact that I have a tendency to set off his claw gimmicks because the buttons are really touchy and really in the way. This is not a particularly difficult transformation. I mean, you know, when I get these from secondhand places, they don't generally come with instructions, although one guy did. I have more, but they're very easy to figure out. But yeah, it's his back legs are related to this third gimmick, and they can be trying sometimes. And again, he doesn't peg together, so you just sort of swivel his forelegs into place, and that's about it. And to be perfectly honest, there's not really much to write home about here. So let's talk about beast modes. Inferno turns into a giant fucking ant. Like I said, the missiles are his back legs. You can technically stick them in his mouth and fire them if you want to. I don't know why you would. The big problem with him is that he's so large and so bulky that he can't stand up. You set him down, his legs will splay out, and he ends up resting on his stomach. That's kind of disappointing. And being just an ant, there's not really much to do with him in beast mode. Polar Claw, though, is, like I said, he's a polar bear. Big surprise. That third gimmick I mentioned. You rear him up on his back legs and his mouth opens. It's kind of cool. I mean, if you consider that this section does actually move. So when you flip it around, it hooks up to some kind of mechanism in the body, and that's why he's so bulky too, is because, you know, this whole section is one piece. He honestly doesn't look too bad. You know, he's got this under here, which is like obvious robot kibble. You can see his chest coming into the sides, and you can see his robot legs, which that's slightly disappointing. But he's a good polar bear. And of course, he becomes horrific when you deploy both of his gimmicks, because then he has one skeleton leg and one gimp leg. Yeah. Ooh. But he's interesting, so I'm going to give him the point for beast mode, if only because there's more to do. And that leaves them tied. But I think it really comes down to Polar Claw is this random polar bear, and Inferno is a character I like, so he gets to win this one. Beast Wars toys, they're kind of a whole different league, because they tend to be a little simpler. You know, the transformation, like I said, there's not a lot to write home about. It's not terribly interesting, but like the sculpts and everything and the gimmicks are all just wacky and awesome. And that's why I like them. Stay tuned next time. I'm going to record it right now when I talk about some more modern toys.